Hey there, cats and kitties. I am the Blues Man, Johnny Blues, coming at you live to talk about episode 1 of the anime series, Violet Evergarden. And this was one that I know there's been a lot of hype surrounding, and I've heard a lot of people talking about it. I've had it recommended to me a few times over. And, I'm the kind of person who doesn't really fall to the hype train. In fact, usually when an anime series or anything, a movie, a book, whatever it is, a comic, an anime, whenever anything has a lot of really surrounding hype, I tend to want to avoid it. Sometimes I'll check it out if it looks like it's something conforming to my interests, potentially something I might get into, something I might dig. And I really kind of, I'm not going to say I was fighting off any sense of reluctance to actually dip into this one because of the hype surrounding it. It was already something that I had noticed and was looking at before I knew anything about the hype. So I have that going for me. In wanting to, I had an interest in it. I wanted to check it out and, sample it out, see what it was going to look like, what it was going to be exactly. And from right out of the gate, I'm glad that it's not a sort of military series. I don't really get into these. In the last few seasons, you've seen a lot of these like Germanic, militaristic World War II era or First World War era, sort of anime series. I have these recommended to me time and time and time again. And I just don't like them. I just don't get into them for whatever reason. The sort of militaristic or military-like anime series that I do get into are things like Kantai Collection Ken Cole, Brave Witches was one recently, Girls Last Tour in the previous season. Kind of, sort of, like thematically was in a war kind of environment, but there wasn't any actual war. It's just a lot of those things don't conform to my tastes or my likes or my interests, so I don't really get into that stuff. And when we start this episode and we have sort of that framework going on a little bit aesthetically and story-wise, I was kind of gritting my teeth and cringing a little bit. I'm like, is this what this is going to be? Because I didn't really watch any PVs or anything like that for quite a while. I couldn't remember. And I like that there isn't so much of that. Like, they might call back on it in flashbacks. They had done so pretty effectively in this first episode, along sort of PTSD lines, along sort of, unrequited love lines, and trying to figure out what love means and all of that stuff, as we see with the main character Violet in this episode. But I like that a war front is not the sort of backdrop. It's sometime after a war has been successfully won, and it's kind of, this young woman who has been a weapon, since a very early age, has been following the orders of this Commander Gilbert, who may or may not be dead. He's probably dead, but whom shared his love for her in his probably dying moments, and this affected her and everything like that. Like, I'm intrigued by all of that. At the same time, I'm a little frustrated by this constant anime trope of like these sort of like robotic anime girls that they don't know what emotions are, they don't know what love is, they don't know, like, they need to be handheld and find their place in the world when they're already at an age where they should have, gained certain bearings. Even if her character has been so sort of enclosed and just sort of born to be a warrior, a fighter, and that's all she's ever known. Like, there's just so much of, like, sometimes it's charming. And I know there's like an anime title for this particular trope, but it escapes me at the moment. But when you have these overly monosyllabic, robotic sort of characters that don't fit in, and they're trying to figure out their place in the world, and they don't understand emotions and everything like that, usually it's played for comedy. Here it's played much more for sympathy and drama. And I don't mind it, but at the same time, there were a few times where, when she's not fitting in, she's not understanding very relatively simplistic things, that I was kind of cringing and gritting my teeth like, oh, come on, figure it out. If she's such an effective fighter, if she's so brutal and so lethal, and she has such cunning skills there, it stands to reason that she is adaptable to other things, even if she might be reluctant to a certain degree. She wants to know where her Commander Gilbert is, follow his orders. She's been recuperating for like 104 days, whatever it was. Like, it's just, there's so much of it that it's like, come on, girl, figure things out. You don't need to be told the way things are going. Observe, make you know, conclusions on your own accord. And you know, she's got this Hodgins guy who you know, claims Gilbert told him to take care of her and bring her to this family, the Evergarden family. She was going to be staying there. She's not going to be, because she made a hell of an impression on them. And so like he's gonna like have her, you know, in this hotel, I guess, that he runs or whatever it was. And then she wants to be part of the auto memoir dolls, they're called. And I'm wondering, are these automatons? Are they love dolls? Like, are they just women and that's their organization name? Like, you know, a la UPS, you know, something like that, since they're sending letters, lovelorn letters, unrequited love letters, all this kind of stuff. It's all fascinating, but there is so much of that trope of her being robotic and being out of her element, a fish out of water, a coming of age aspect, that it's just like, I want a character who's a little smarter on the uptake, who's a little quicker on the uptake, who can figure things out for herself, not have to be handheld and told. She's told by the one cat, the young blonde guy, whose name I forget, who reminded me of Zeldinch from Final Fantasy VIII, oddly enough. You know, who's kind of spastic, and he's walking her through the process of getting all the letters and everything ready, and then he's like, okay, next up we'll do the delivery. And she ends up doing it later that night because, you know, rest. She's unaccustomed to rest. She just is a workhorse, and you know, Hodgins, her pseudo boss caregiver, finds her out delivering late at night and is like, "What are you doing? You know, you're nuts!" Like, no, she just jumps to that conclusion. She jumps to these obtuse, what ought to be charming conclusions, and that one was arguably charming. I did think that was funny that she was doing nighttime deliveries, but all of the other things. It's just kind of like, I don't know what I love you means. What does that mean? Like, I don't know. There's such an embellishment of the novice, you know, the naivete, that when done right can be charming and hilarious. And, you know, this, I'm still reserving my judgment where it falls for my tastes in this particular series. But from right off the bat, this is cinematic and gorgeous in scope. You know, the animation, the backdrops, the sense I get of the story, and, you know, things like her adamantine arms reminded me, of course, being a comic book fan, of Wolverine from the X-Men, you know, Full Metal Alchemist kind of, sort of, with the aesthetics of the show, Battle Angel Alita a little bit, with the idea that she has machinations as a part of her, you know, body. And stylistically, I was reminded of things like Princess Principal as well, and even the anime series World End. You know, what do you do at the end of the world? Will you stop? Will you save us? Whatever the title is, a very long title. Aesthetically and thematically, it kind of reminded me of all of those things, a jumble of all of those things. And it just, and as well as calling back on Final Fantasy, you know, mentioning Zeldinch, the character designs kind of reminded me a little bit of the original release of Final Fantasy Tactics. A little bit, the sort of steampunk-ish kind of, sort of. I don't know if, like, the World End series, there's going to be, you know, lizard creatures and animal creatures who are, you know, hybrids of humanity and you know, stuff like that, like a more fantasy setting, or if it's just more steampunk that this show is. But it did leave me with the overhanging question, you know, is this Gilbert guy dead? I'm assuming he probably is, and Hodgins knows that, because, you know, he puts his hand in his pocket and he's like, well, Gilbert told me to take care of you. That was his orders, you know, give you a life that you can live freely now that you don't have to fight anymore, and you know, all that kind of stuff. And then, but when, you know, Violet asks him pointedly, well, where is he? Is he dead? His other hand in his other pocket, like, sort of grips tightly, and, like, so it seems to me he's staving off the cruel, as he sees it, revelation that, yes, Gilbert is well and truly dead, and because it'll probably have a very poor effect on her. And I think, you know, this story, what I gauge from it is that it is somewhat of a coming of age thing, where she's a wallflower, she's machinistic, robotic, has only known war and battle and all that stuff, you know, X-23 style, for most of her life, and she's still relatively young. I mean, even the little Zeldinch kid in the mailroom is like, that kid, like, you know, he doesn't look much older than her. In fact, she looked older than him, to my eye. But you know, like it could have been just sarcasm, you know, like oh, the new blood, the green girl, you know, but not necessarily age is what I mean to say there. But you know, because she is so much on this learning curve, it is a little irksome to me, like how obtuse she is to certain degrees, and it's you know, the sense I get of it is she's going to be opening herself up. She's going to be growing and evolving. Hopefully, the hope is, I think, on Hodgins' part as well as that she can now live a life of her own accord. By the end of the episode, when she makes that formal request, I want to be a part of the auto memoir dolls, you know, to figure out what love means, what I love you means, and all this kind of stuff. You know, Hodgins is overheard in the voiceover to say this is the first time she asked for something, made a request that was directly involving herself, not following someone else's objectives or orders or anything like that. So that intrigues me. I liked the episode overall. I really, really liked it. I did not quite love it. I'm not quite bouncing off the walls. I feel like this is going to be, you know, unlike most people are probably going to be coming to the hype train and covering it and, you know, salivating over every last little dripping minute of it and everything like that. Like, I feel like I'm going to want to watch it more passively, unless something spectacularly unexpected happens in episode 2, you know, to say, I doubt I'm going to be back talking about it, you know, episodically or whatever like that, cover it in reviews. Maybe I'll do write-ups over on my Facebook account where I talk about any anime series that I don't feel motivated to do videos about, usually. But, you know, like I say, I really like the aesthetics of it. I love the cinematic scope of it. I love the beautiful animation and art and character designs, all those things that it reminded me of as I talked about in this video. And I find the story somewhat intriguing. I'm glad it's not surrounding a military wartime kind of thing. It's sort of post that. And that intrigues me. I like that aspect of it. I like her character design. I want to know more about this world and how far down the rabbit hole all of these steampunk aesthetics go. Like, you know, she has these adamantine arms and everything like that. Are these auto memoir dolls actually automatons? Are they love dolls? Are they some sort of AI thing? Does that exist in this, you know, sort of post-World War II aesthetic era that the show takes place in? And what other kind of fancy, weird, you know, steampunk level technologies might exist and all that kind of stuff? Do other species exist, like the World End series, which I highly doubt, based on what we've seen. And I don't need any of that. I don't need overly abundant fantasy elements, you know, that kind of stuff. But, so yeah, I enjoyed the first episode. And I was a little irked by how naive Violet is, and because it is that overly, you know, overplayed trope of her being robotic and not having any human emotions, not really ever living, you know, humanly, because she's always been a fighter, a warrior, and she's so lethal and all this kind of stuff. And it is, again, it's kind of like the X-23 thing, where she has to find her place and grow into some level of being less than a machine, less than you know, just a killing machine, and now she has the freedom to do that, and she'll be exploring that, and hopefully the surrounding characters. I already like some of, you know, the female characters we've seen in the Auto Memoir Dolls troupe. The sort of main one who transcribes the letter that the guy came in and asked Violet to do at first. It's funny because I had just gotten home yesterday from errands, and I saw a woman who looks the spitting image of her, complete with like a chest tattoo, sort of like as this woman with the curly brown hair and everything, you know. So I like the design of all the characters. I like the aesthetics thus far, and you know, the themes of this thus far. I do hope they don't overplay, and that it doesn't overstay its welcome, the naivete of Violet herself as a character, because that will get exacerbating to me. Because they're not really playing it for comedy, although it does have some quirky, humorous elements to it. But I hope they pepper it back, dial it back a little bit, and she comes into her own a little more. It kind of also reminded me like when Hodgins is bringing her back to the Evergarden Manor, you know. It reminded me of Ancient Magus Bride, which I'm still watching as well, a little bit, you know. There isn't any magic or demons and mages and elves and all that kind of stuff like in Ancient Magus Bride, but Just thematically, it reminded me of that a little bit. So I do hope she comes into her own a lot more. You know, you look at the character, the main character in Mage's Bride, for example, and she was very quicker to adapting and finding her place in the world. And she wasn't like a machine, robotic killing machine, anything like what Violet is. But you see that there is intellect behind those eyes, much more than anyone had assumed. And I kind of hope we see that in Violet. I don't want them to constantly bang on and on and on that she was a machine, she was a killing machine, she doesn't know anything, she doesn't know how to live life, and, you know, what's a spoon for, and, you know, all that kind of stuff. Like, I've seen it so many times before, and I don't want that to be the overbearing thing. They keep, you know, revisiting the well regarding her character in this series. So, yeah, otherwise, as I say, I really enjoyed the first episode. I don't think I'm going to be covering it episodically, but it all remains to be seen. I'll wait and find out after episode 2 airs whether or not I feel compelled to talk about it. And otherwise, I'd love to hear from you guys what you thought about episode 1 of Violet Evergarden. I know it was highly, highly anticipated. I've heard from a number of people that I talk to frequently and sometimes infrequently that they've all been waiting for this one. And I'm sure it will be a sellout of just excitement for a lot of people. But especially if you didn't happen to enjoy it, if you had any qualms, if any of your reaction to it mirror my own, I'd love to hear that in the comments below as well. Our POVs can certainly disagree. It's all about the topic of talk and just having a great conversation, even if we just don't happen to align with our perspectives on where we're coming from with anime series like this. And so yeah, that'll be pretty much it for me on this. Hope this video finds you well, and I'll catch you all later. Peace.